Welcome to our webinar this evening. As Todd mentioned, my name is Curtis Crandall, and I'm the managing partner for Fortune Management here in Western Pennsylvania, the state of Ohio, the entire state of West Virginia. And many of you know this, but Fortune Management is a national coaching and consulting company for dentists and their teams, and we really help them with lots of different things. And something that we've been seeing kind of be a really hot topic lately is this concept of really kind of pushing out the PPO dependence in their practice, and whether it's wanting to go fee for service or just kind of, reevaluate how many networks they're currently tied to. That's something that we've been helping out with, and really we've seen a major uptick in that in the last probably 18 to 36 months, pretty much. Right around COVID or after COVID kind of settled down, we started seeing people saying, why am I doing this? Why am I accepting this drastically low fee? Everything else is going up in cost, and we got to do something about it. And so tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to review the roadmap that you really could take a look at and go through to help push your PPO dependence out of your practice. So there's no really one size fits all solution for every practice on tonight, right? I'm not going to say that every single one of you should go fee for service. I'm not going to say that every single one of you should drop, Delta or drop United Concordia, because it really is specific to your practice. What you're going to see when we go through the data analysis portion, that's probably one of the most important steps that you do next to the mindset and beliefs of you and your team. But what you'll see is that, there's some practices that might be a little bit too wound, too tightly wound around different insurances, that the process is going to be majorly different for you than someone who might have a smaller or more diversified, rather, insurance affiliation. So the goal is that after tonight that you'll have some great insight on really how to take the steps that are appropriate for your practice and customize for your practice. So let's jump right into it. Maybe. There we go. All right. So right here, this is our roadmap. And feel free to take pictures, write down notes. I'm a big believer in that. If you're here and you're experiencing it firsthand, or even if you're watching a recording because you couldn't make it, I highly recommend you take down notes, because there's a lot of things that I might say that aren't in this slideshow that you might want to ask questions on later. And so that will help you kind of get your mind wrapped around what questions you might want to ask. And so right here is the roadmap. And this is really the 6 elements that you need to kind of think about and go through in order to reduce your insurance affiliation. The first one, without a doubt, is mindset. The question is the mindset that you want to have, the questions you want to be able to answer is, how do you make the decision about the plans that you take and the insurances that you're in network with, right? Ultimately, the question you want to ask yourself is, who am I willing to partner with as it pertains to an insurance company? How my patients benefit, right? How are their benefits? How will their benefits change? How are my practice benefit, right? And then all of the beliefs around that decision. And those are the beliefs of you as the owner of your practice. And I even saw some team members on here, and those are the team member beliefs as well. I'll tell you what, the team member belief and the owner belief around, your insurance affiliation and why you're in network with an insurance and why you're willing to go out of network with that insurance is going to make or break this as a successful process for you, or it'll make it a smooth road or a majorly bumpy road. Okay. The second one is team buy-in. So we all know that you can't grow a practice without growing the people inside it. And, if you don't have a great team to surround you and have bought into your vision and who support your vision, things will be tough for you. So team buy-in is absolutely imperative to this process and will make or break the execution thereof. Now, the third is know your data, right? You can't really make any sound, logical decisions without knowing the data that you're working with, right? It's going to help guide which path you go down. Is it, do you, clean out 2 insurances at once? Do you do one at a time, right? Do you relayer some of the insurances that you're already in network with to make a more calculated decision because you have, an 88% or 80% dependency with one insurance? So knowing how to calculate that will help you know when to take action and how long that timeline will take in order to go from I'm deciding to get out of network to I'm finally out of network. So data is key. The fourth is elevating your systems, right? So I'm a big believer in processes, right? All of your processes need to be written down so they're predictable and repeatable, okay? And anytime you make a business decision that changes kind of the direction that you go with your business, it's going to put a lot of stress on the current structure and processes that you have in place and systems that you have in place, right? So you want to ask yourself, as you're going through this, do the current systems that you have in place still serve your business as it is today, right? If we're going to do a great job at growing and expanding our business, then we really should constantly be reevaluating the systems and processes and how they serve our current business and the future business that we're going to be in the next 12 months, 24 months, 36 months and down the road and there, and so on and so forth. The fifth area is membership program, right? Whether you're choosing to decrease your dependency on insurance or drop insurance altogether, or maybe you just want to build the standard of care in your practice, I truly believe that a VIP concierge membership program is the way to go, and you must have a strong one. Your team must know how to talk about it. They must be invested in it. They must have great beliefs around it, and you got to talk about it to your patients. It's one of those things you can't mention once and expect someone to sign up. It has to be talked about over and over and over and over again. And the sixth area is your marketing strategy. Hand in hand with elevating your systems, anytime that you make a different business decision and you're going to go outside of your current market in your practice, you must elevate your practice by filling in the gaps with new marketing strategies to pull in a new patient base from a area or a community or a type of patient that you did not have previously, right? So you change some things, you must fill in those gaps through marketing and bring in new patients. So these 6 areas, and our intent for tonight is to learn about how to restructure your business so that you can structure it to be prepared to make the correct emotional and logical decisions that you need to make to run a successful practice. And most of the time as a practice coach, if you were going to know some of the stuff that we know, you would probably be a little more confident in making some of these decisions. And so really what our goal is that we put some of that power into your hands. So these can be your ideas and you can take them and run with them. And as we are there to help you, we're always willing to go above and beyond with our time, energy, and effort, and very much so support you in this process. But first tonight, it really starts with you. So let's jump into the mindset here for a minute. This next slide is kind of an interesting one. Mad Men, right? What does the TV show have to do with our current conversation tonight? Well, as the TV show was based around a marketing company on Madison Avenue, part of our industry was developed in the same context on Madison Avenue with a marketing company that was hired to create a marketing campaign for a certain type of toothpaste. And what that toothpaste was Pepsodent. And the company Unilever, who owned Pepsodent toothpaste, they went to Madison and they said, can you create us a marketing campaign or something to help us promote our product? In return, what they got was a catchy jingle and a phrase that was to brush your teeth twice a day for 2 minutes a day and to see your dentist 2 times a year. And that was the concept that they threw out there. In turn, what happened was the dental insurance industry latched onto this concept of seeing a dentist 2 times per year because it fit their business model and it made the industry standard. Unfortunately, what we know is that by taking this 2 times per year concept, they were dictating and determining how how we were going to keep our patients healthy, and unfortunately didn't really fit in the parameters of keeping our patients healthy. I know that we've done a lot of polls and stuff out there, and we've done a lot of questionnaires, and we talk a lot of teams and hygienists specifically, and we've asked them, what do you think it takes, and how many times a year would you like to see your patient in order to keep them healthy? And they said 3 times a year, and that's for majority of the healthy patients. On an average across the board, it was 3 times a year. So we have some solutions we can talk about later tonight about how we can get that point across to our patients. But this is, this is really how the industry was shaped based on a marketing campaign. So let's fast forward to present day, right? Where are we now? So what we know now is that, unfortunately, only about 35% of patients go to see the dentist twice a year. And we know that patients need more than 2 cleanings per year, as I just mentioned, in order to get healthy and stay healthy. We also know that there's a huge link between oral health and other effects of other areas on your body. We know that there's a massive connection between systemic diseases associated with oral health, particularly cardiovascular disease and diabetes. And unfortunately, the insurance benefits have not kept up with the health risks and things going on in our community, right? We know that there's been less coverage and benefits for patients, lower reimbursements of practices, And unfortunately, what I've seen out there is that some practices even let those terms dictated by insurance dictate their standard of care. And it's kind of like a hamster wheel. They get on it and they just keep coming back year after year, two times, and it's not there benefiting our patients. And so what we want to ask ourselves is, what do we have to do? What do we have to believe? What's the mindset that we have to have in order to get our team on board, to get our patients on board? Right? And sometimes those conversations can be tricky, right? The type of care that we know that our patients need is not always the type of care that our insurance affiliated partners say is okay, right? We see it all the time, right? On top of that, we're at a crossroads right now. Okay, and so our industry is certainly coming up on some very interesting times, right? Insurance that was available in the past is no longer available now. If it's not already drastically changed, it might already if it's not already gone, it's drastically changed. And on a larger scale, the truth is the dental profession has changed enormously over the past 3 decades. And in fact, if we were to take a look at medicine, we would see a very, very similar parallel to dentistry. 30 years ago, medical doctors began to form group practices or went to work for larger corporations, healthcare providers. And this is absolutely the direction that we see dentistry going in today. And so what I think we need to do, and what Fortune thinks that we need to do, what we know we need to do, is absolutely take a stand for that. So let's talk a little about the industry. So the first point we want to make is that the US dental market has been known for decades as a sleepy, consistent, and mature market driven by independent dental practitioners, right? And that it just absolutely has been. And the second talking point is that currently we're undergoing a major shift across the value chain, including in distribution, purchasing, delivering, and value creation, and independent dentistry is absolutely under attack. And as you know, we are all about the preservation of private practice for independent dentists. The third is that dentists sell or affiliate with today's DSOs are selling their businesses a fraction of their potential, giving up control and missing out on the real value creation from that affiliation. The real value creation comes after they're affiliated, after the practice is now out of their hands. We'll talk about that here in a minute. The fourth talking point is independent dentists are seeking solutions to maintain independence in this rapidly consolidating and ever-increasing competitive environment while maximizing individual value creation while trying to maintain autonomy. It's kind of interesting look at these 4 major bullet points and seeing how dentistry is constantly under attack and all the great things that we get to deal with on an everyday basis outside of having to take care of our patients, take care of our team, try and figure out this insurance thing, all while trying to make a profit because we know that we are in an for-profit business. So let's take a look at kind of how why we are where we are right now within the DSO kind of infiltration into dentistry. So right here are the 4 major ways that DSOs unlock the value from independent dentists. Okay, it's an important slide because what we're looking at right now is we're not playing on a level playing field. The first the first quadrant up here, the buy-sell arbitrage quadrant, is kind of interesting. If you had $1 million practice and they said that they'd pay you $3 million, the day after it closes, they're going to report it on their books for possibly twice that, $6 million. Because what happens is generally DSOs will pay anywhere between 3 to 6 times EBITDA. And the day after that, it automatically becomes almost double that, 6 to 10 times EBITDA, because they feel that your practice is worth more in their portfolio with all of their additional assets tied to it. So they're making an argument that by owning your practice, it's going to be worth more to them than it is to private practice dentists, therefore arbitraging the value. The second is asset leverage. Common levers are expanding hours, expanding days, driving great returns in the fixed assets and investments into that practice, constantly hiring associates, opening up more days, doubling the staff. Basically what they're doing is they are increasing the capacity of that business by now becoming affiliated, or they call it affiliated, but it's really buying that practice. The next one is the financial leverage, right? They're able to they have lower cost of debt. They can borrow money cheaper than an independent dentist can, which doesn't seem fair to me. They can obtain higher leverage. As a result, they can lower the total cost of capital. And the cost of capital is increasing, as we know, which is actually one of the reasons that you're seeing the DSOs kind of slow down in being able to offer really indecent proposals to our doctors. So I've seen it. I don't know if you guys realize that or not, but we're certainly seeing DSOs offer less of these crazy, crazy numbers, to our private practitioners, because they're kind of, because money's getting more expensive, and it's certainly slowing down a little bit. The final way, which is kind of what we're here to talk about tonight, is operational synergies. So really what cost synergies are particularly, we're talking about higher reimbursements from insurances to those DSO affiliates. And the higher reimbursements that DSOs get from insurance companies, unfortunately, are what's happening to us, which is they're taking it from the private practice. Fundamentally, DSOs get paid more than independent dentists. It's just the way it is. And, they can buy a $1 million practice, and that practice, that has the same team doing the same dentistry, but now they're affiliated with a DSO, all of a sudden overnight, or very soon after they're affiliated, are making an extra $60,000, $80,000, even $120,000. And, second, they have plans and programs in place for the uninsured. And third, they recognize the value of insourcing specialties. They have purchasing, leveraging, and things like that. But notice the highlighted word. What does it say? It says higher insurance reimbursement. What we know across the country is that dental offices bill their dental insurance and they get the standard reimbursement. A lot of these practices have also been told that, they'll go to the insurance company and they'll say, can I negotiate my fee structure with you? And what do they say? They say, no, we can't, we don't negotiate. We don't negotiate. We don't negotiate. Well, we have practices that have sold over the last several years to DSOs that within 12 months, a lot of times sooner than that, you will see anywhere between an 8 to 12% increase in their reimbursement from the same insurance company that said that they were unwilling to negotiate with you before. They're doing the same amount of visits, seeing the same doctors, the same team in the same facility. The question is, how does this even happen? Well, as I mentioned at the beginning of the slide, it's an unlevel playing field between DSOs and independent practices. It's even more so unfortunate that independent dentists, we're not even allowed to talk to other dentists about what we're charging, right? It's called collusion. So we all have to, all these independent dentists have to just arbitrarily come up with these fee schedules. Where do they get them? They just have a fee. They feel it's an appropriate fee to charge. They might look at the NDAS. They might, just think that this is what seems fair to my patient. Some of them, majority are made up. A lot of them are adopted from the previous owner that they bought the practice from. And to the point where if they share their fee with someone that they know, their colleague down the road, unfortunately, they put fear in us that says that we could commit collusion or fraud or have other federal punishments put against us. Is it fair? It's absolutely not fair. What are we going to do about it? Well, there are some solutions. But what they require is the doctor to take control of their business decisions. And that's really what we're hoping that you guys will take away from tonight, is how can you make better educated decisions in your business that are smart, educated decisions. So these are the 4 fundamental ways that we've seen DSOs kind of infiltrate our industry and really kind of say that they're going to provide value, and they do. And this is currently how they're doing it. So the question is, what do we do on our end? Really what it takes is it gets, it makes us get outside the box, right? Practices that remain on cutting edge technology that invest in your practice, or dentists that invest in your practice. A lot of the dentists on here that I know that have done this, have a higher standard of care. That is what creates a lasting success. And it's 100% time to take ownership of where we are right now and help guide to where we want to go. Take back the reins for your patients, for your practice. And let's take a look at ways that we can elevate your standard of care and strengthen the systems that you already have in place to best position yourselves, your practice for the immediate time and the future for the success of your business. So how do we get outside the box? Well, there's the emotional side and the logical side, right? The emotional brain and the logical brain. And, probably a bunch of you are on here right now because of the emotional side of things. And really what that looks like to me is that's things that you're hearing out there in the industry, right? You want to go fee for service because you heard your neighbors doing it, or you heard that insurance is just cutting fees, so you better figure out how to drop your insurances. That certainly is an emotional reason, and that's okay. I'm not saying that's wrong, but you got to think about, you need to look at how it's affecting your patients and your practice, right? How it's affecting your decision making by currently being in network, and also how it's going to affect your patients and your ability to take care of them once you get out of network, right? That's a good why to kind of to explore. All right. Then there's the whole experience side of things, right? I truly believe that, if we don't have this high volume practice and we have a little lower volume responsibility, we can take better care of more people instead of trying to take less care or worse care of more people, right? Kind of consolidate it. Then there's the standard of care, right? Being able to elevate your care, not having to double book patients, right? These are all the emotional reasons. Then there's the service base, right? Being able to take the overall service that you provide for your team and elevate that as a very emotional thing, right? That's an emotional reason why you might want to think about getting out of your insurance affiliation. Then there's the whole logical side of it, right? So emotion is great. I'm more of a logical person. So what does the logic have to say? Well, you better start thinking about some of the logic, because if you only go emotional, you're going to be shortchanged somewhere along the line. The impact on production and patient numbers, what's that going to look like, right? How do we analyze it? Is it going to be positive or negative, right? What's our threshold for potential loss of patients or loss of production? How do we make that up, right? Is there certain bandwidth that we can stay within where we can say we can keep doing what we're doing, we can lose X amount of patients, increase their fee a certain amount? I don't know if you guys know this, it's called the Kodak study, right? It's kind of an interesting concept, but can that take place in order for us to still stay on the same track or even grow above and beyond? All right. I mentioned it before, but logic, benefits of dealing with decreased number of team members. It's just a thing, right? You have less people to take care of. You have less team members that you have to take care of. No longer, want to have a high volume practice, as I mentioned. You don't want to keep running your team ragged with max quantity of people coming through there. Maybe it's time to go fee for service. Maybe it's a time just to reduce some of your dependencies on some of your larger payers. So again, I said it, but it has to be both. If you only go logical with no emotion, the execution is going to be off. If you only go emotional with no logic, you won't be able to have a solid game plan in place. As coaches, what we are here to do is to make sure that you have a well-balanced, kind of thought process or strategy, balanced with, enough heart and mind to solve the problem. Really, at the end of the day, the team is a huge key factor, right? Strategy is important, and strategy with your team is important, right? You got to have the strategy to then bring to your team. What that does is that really creates a lot of certainty for your people, right? If you kind of do this on a whim and you go to your team and say, this is what we're doing without any strategy to build structure around, it's not going to create a lot of certainty for your people. So if you're going to write down anything tonight, I would write down, create as much certainty for your team so they can create as much certainty for your patients. It is so, so important. It requires having conversations over and over again with your patients, which can be exhausting, but it can absolutely be very, very powerful when done correctly. So we've got emotional, and we've got logic. Let's keep expanding on the mindset here. The experience of being your patient will matter much more than your clinical expertise. Unfortunately, that's the truth. I've said it in live seminars multiple times where, patients cannot judge you or a lot of times they can't say, oh, that was a great crown pep, you're the best doctor that I get to go to, but they will judge you on how you made them feel. And so that's something that we got to get through our heads, as doctors on this webinar tonight. You really need to take ownership of that. You need to make sure that you have the patient experience at heart first, actually kind of neck and neck with your clinical skills, because you don't want those to drop. That will bite you, but you want to make sure that you absolutely showcase the experience that you're giving your patient. If we can't provide, sound clinical care because of a lower reimbursement, which I'm not recommending, then, we got to make sure that we have the fuel there in order to make sure that our patient experience is where it needs to be. And again, if we can't provide the clinical expertise, we absolutely need to think about getting out of our insurance networks. So that's number one. The experience of being your patient will matter much more than their clinical experience to your patient. Now, this is such an important one to me because I truly believe that getting paid properly is not a bad thing, right? Getting paid well for doing good things is a good thing. And, that is something that your team needs to take ownership of. Each of these statements, right? This one right here, the experience of being your patient will matter much more than your clinical expertise. And getting paid properly is not bad. It's something that you need to deliver to your team. You got to have a conversation with your team on it, a mastermind on it, and you got to create all the good reasons why these two phrases and two terms are exceptionally important, right? I truly believe that as a for-profit business in today's society, it's our responsibility to run a profitable and sustainable business. Most independent dentists, don't really know how to calculate, how to get paid effectively, right? They aren't calculating the profit margin of each procedure. They aren't calculating the true costs of what it takes in order to get a procedure done. And that goes back to how we are pricing our procedures, right? Because if we knew that, we would be having a little bit different fee schedule, right? That's how we got the fee schedule. That, so we've adopted certain fee schedules because of this. That's the going rate as far as where we currently are is basically what we've kind of adopted. All right, so going through this process is going to help us understand the business and the cost of goods and the time that it takes. Another great question to pose to your team is that what they believe about dentistry and an investment. I truly believe that dentistry is a phenomenal long-term investment. Unfortunately, as human beings, we have a hard time thinking long-term, right? I'm sure we've all seen the question out there is, do you want, something now that's less than, or do you want something, 3 years from now or 5 years from now that would be substantially better? And majority of the time, people choose the short term, all right? We think patients just want a quick fix. However, that's not necessarily the case. I can't tell you how many practices that I've gone out there and done valuations on where I've just seen that it seems like it's a very quick fix relationship, because that's what's felt easy to everybody involved in it. It's felt easy to the team. It's felt easy to the patient. It's felt easy to the doctor, right? And unfortunately, we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot when we have that mindset, because quality always costs less in the end, right? That's a belief. That's the mindset that you want to consider, that you want to take on as the leader and really the hub of the wheel of your team, right? Also, price makes a pretty big statement about who you are and what you believe in, right? So dentistry is a phenomenal long-term investment. And, I love the saying that, you tell your patient that you really should not make a, minor benefit dictate a major decision in your life, like caring for your teeth and caring for your health. I think it's a very, very important thing. And the more of these kind of, canned one-liners that you get across to your team, the better you will be, because the more that they will be prepared in order to provide certainty for your patients. Let's see here. So going out of network is a business decision that requires execution from the team. I've said it over and over again that the team is key, right? Fortune has taken hundreds of practices at this point, fee for service, and probably an equal amount have helped transform their insurance relationships. Sometimes we delay that process because we don't have the right team in place. I've seen, situations where we'll rush headlong into it because that's what the doctor wants and they want it now. And I'm just thinking that, not everyone on this team is appropriate in order to have the right conversations. And unfortunately, it can dismantle the process a little bit. Sometimes it can totally, set it back a year, unfortunately. But, my recommendation is that if you don't think you've got the right people on the bus, that it's not going to work out as well as we would hope, or as well as it could, right? So we got to consider that. It's got to be team execution first, all right? And then that will help with the attrition that could take place, and there will be some, and we'll show you what those numbers look like. That will absolutely help with the attrition that that can come from just doing it haphazardly. Experience is everyone's job. I've kind of alluded to it, right? Experience is everyone's job, and it's a service industry, right? We're in the people business. We're in the relationship business, going above and beyond for our patients, communicating with our patients about what makes them feel like we've got their back, talking to them about, not bad mouthing the insurance, but, we need to protect the doctor and their decision to do that. And it's not about them making more money at the end of the day. Ultimately, it's not about that at all, right? The economics is a portion of it, but really it's not the whole thing. And I sitting here, having done this with my practices, I truly believe that, dropping some networks, which we've not dropped all, but dropping the big ones, it's not all about just the financial impact, right? We know that the patient experience falls off on everyone, even the team, whenever we are just overly inundated. And when we can take care of less people at a higher level, that's a good thing. I've seen situations out there where, we'll have a team member who's been with the practice for, 20, 30 years, and the doctor will decide to go out of network, and this person just can't wrap their head around why the doctor would do that, right? Everyone in the practice wants to use their insurance. Everyone in the practice only wants to do what insurance will pay for, because that's how it's always been. Unfortunately, sometimes what that leads to is that person having to either, opt out on their own, or us having to have a very difficult conversation with them about where the practice is going and their involvement with that practice, right? If their beliefs are not in line with the practice is going, therefore they're in violation of the vision of the practice and the team committed vision and the doctor vision, we might have to kind of change that a little bit, right? So again, team is key. Team is absolutely key. So let's take a shift here. So we talked about mindset, right? Hopefully you guys wrote lots of notes down, lots of articulate conversations to have with your team at a team meeting. But let's talk about the data here for a minute. I think it's important to differentiate the difference between customers and consumers. And it hasn't been too long that I've thought about this concept, because the customers versus consumers, the payers versus the patients. The payers and the patients and your customers are actually the 1099s that you receive from your insurance companies every year. You can look at all the participating networks that you're part of, and you will see what your customer base is, because they're your payers, right? The consumers fall into those customer bases. So the customers are the payers. The customers are the payers, and the consumers are the patients. Now, if we're going to open any kind of business, let's say a widget company, right? And you have so many customers, the stores that sell your widgets, we have to be very careful about making one customer our primary customer, because if they leave, you lose your consumer base, right? When a practice decides to take on a customer, they put all of their eggs in one customer base. It becomes very tricky when that customer comes to you to renegotiate terms, or even says, this is what I'm going to dictate that I pay you now. Or even worse, I'm not even going to honor this to anybody else but you. So what happens to your practice? Do you think that makes it hard for you to sell your practice? Absolutely. So let's look at this here for a minute. So, you want to evaluate how much of your patient base is coming from one customer. If 30% of your patients are coming from Delta, that's a pretty significant number, but 30% is absolutely still recoverable. I've seen it upwards of 50%. When you get 50%, it's going to be, it's not possible to, or I'm sorry, it's still possible to walk away, but it's definitely going to be a multi-stage process. Okay. And, what I'm going to have to lean on are other things like the systems and marketing to bridge the gap in order to make sure that we, not just retain as many patients as possible, but we attract as many new patients as possible once you hit that 50% mark. Really, unfortunately, once you get to the 80%, market share within your practice, and hopefully, no one on this call is there, it's far more difficult. We've seen practices at 70, 80% who have created a decreased dependency over multiple years, but it certainly does not happen as fast as the 30% market or the 50% market. And, unfortunately, these a lot of times need to be coupled with a merger or acquisition in order to have a huge influx of patients. Mergers and acquisitions are great. They're one of the quickest ways to recover, but they're absolutely one of the most costly ways to recover. Okay. We need a good baseline of where we are starting and know which way you're going. So, are you getting more dependent on this insurance plan? That's an important question to ask, right? When we have an associate, in the room or coming to us who's looking to buy a practice, this right here is a very relevant conversation. Unfortunately, it's come up a couple of times recently with clients where they'll look to bring in an associate, or look to transition out of their practice, or sell their practice, or will look to buy a practice. But what they need to look at is what they're actually buying and the customers that they are buying, what fee schedules they're buying, right? That customer, what customers are attached to those payers, and how much of the practice makes up of that. If they buy a practice that's 80% or more dependent on a Delta, United Concordia, or Cigna, whatever it is, and that company won't honor that same fee schedule for the new owner, it becomes a very difficult situation to change that business model and to think you're still going to receive the same value, when you acquire that practice as that previous owner had. So, looking at the valuation side is important for the buyers, but it's just as important for the sellers as well. So people who are looking to transition in the next, 3 to 5 years, you want to ask yourself, how attractive is my practice going to be if I don't decrease my dependency on some of these insurance plans? If I don't stop the bleed now and have 50, 80% of my patients in one insurance basket, that's a tough thing. There's been a period of times when these doctors got, fat and happy on one insurance company. They went all in on that insurance company. Delta reaches out to offices and they say, you just become a premier provider and don't worry about any of the other insurance policies out there. Just be fee for service and Delta Premier, and you'll be very well taken care of. Delta knows what they were doing because they created their premier network based on this fundamental. And it was meant to be a very high reimbursing fee for service style relationship. And that was attractive at the time. But what have they done now, right? When they hit maximum capacity in a market, They cut the legs out from underneath those providers. They no longer let any new dentist enter their premier network. And now they start peeling back the layers and they start decreasing reimbursement to people, right? And that's what happens whenever a insurance company reaches max capacity in a market. They've got a responsibility to, or what they think is a responsibility to do whatever they do with their profits, if it's shareholders or whatever, right? They have a heavily consolidated market with continued down pressure on fee schedules, right? So they only have so many directions to look, right? Networks and carriers are finding it difficult to expand due to market dynamics, lacks of sufficient scale, and participating providers. And we're seeing it all over the place. Not every market is like this just yet, but it is happening in more and more markets as we know it. And every market's different, right? Western Pennsylvania is massively different than California, than Oklahoma. It's all a little bit different. So you have to do your homework based on where you are. I realize we got people from all over the country on this webinar. So again, it's not a one size fits all, but you got to do your homework. Okay, you got to figure out where you are right now and where you need to go. All right. So the deal is that, more dentists that join a network, the less the insurance company has to pay them because they can continue to give dividends to their shareholders, as I mentioned. Their goal is to increase profits. And this is the dilemma, right? There are other payer networks out there that would love to pay you a fairer or fuller value on our practices, but they need participating providers. So there's different ways to do that. They have to get to the employees and the HR managers to accept their plans. That's one of the reasons that we created True Blue Dental Networks, aiming to solve this problem. This is currently, I believe it's just in California, and we're looking to hopefully expand it, other parts of the country as we roll it out. But what we're doing is we're putting together a network of providers who decide that the fee range that they will accept. So we go to the practice and we get a collective group of doctors, and Fortune's a great way to do that and decide what's the minimum threshold that we're willing to take on a fee schedule, right? Then what we do is we go to the non-dominant payers rather, and we talk to them about bringing these providers into their network, right? What would you give them, right? What would that fee schedule be? Right now in California, I believe it is, they've got 7 payers lined up that are willing to give great, fair, fuller value fee schedules to these providers. And that's what the True Blue Dental Network's all about. Something I'm super excited about. And there's other ones out there, but we're excited to kind of help and be on the forefront of that. So the more that these payers get more employees in their network, the more they can take the market share from the bigger dominant players, right? So we're not doing what Delta's doing. We're offsetting that. We're massively trying to offset that. So let's continue on the know your data concept. So what do you notice about this fee schedule here? We've got UCR, we've got Delta, and then we've got the NDAS, 50, 70, 90. Well, how you're pricing your fee schedule is incredibly important. I've seen it time and time again. I'll go into a practice and I'll notice that, the fees are set at a certain spot, and I'll inquire about it. And they say, well, why would I increase my fee above that mark when United Concordia or Delta or whatever the big paying insurance company is doesn't go above that, right? They feel like they're just losing an uphill battle. And the reason that you need to do that is because what insurance companies want to do is they want to know that they're getting a good deal too. They want to make sure that they are getting a 20, 30, 40% discount off your UCR fee. So in this example, if this practice had someone at the front desk who said, we shouldn't be writing off these insurance adjustments, let's just go to our UCR fee, which is 80%, which 80% of our patients have anyway, because they're Delta, and it's easier, it's easier for the front office. They don't have to do adjustments. They're really doing their practice and the practices around them a disservice. Excuse me. So what do you think happens? Well, Delta looks at this, and it is the fastest way to not get an increase. It's also probably the fastest way to possibly get a reduction in your fee, right? Because they see that your max fee is, as high as theirs is. They already feel like they're overpaying. And this is a big problem that I see, not just in Pittsburgh, but it's certainly everywhere. They won't even give up, your 90 to 95% of your UCR. You got to maintain a healthy UCR in order to cap your reimbursements, because a lot of times, again, like I said, these were set from just possibly not even wanting to do the adjustments and just making it easy. Just bill what they have. 80% of the patients have it, and let's make it easy for everybody. But no, that's not what you need to do. So Our recommendation is that you should always be within, 70, 80, sometimes 85 or 90, depending on the type of practice, of the National Dental Advisory Service. And one thing I forgot to mention is at the end of this webinar, we're going to have a couple QR codes for you to scan, and you're going to be able to get two things, right? One of those is an NDAS advisory fee schedule for your area, and the other one is our white paper that talks a lot about the strategy that I went through tonight, but it's almost even a more in-depth guide about how to customize certain letters, customize certain dialogues, and different role play settings for you and your team. And I'll kind of talk about that as we kind of unfold in our conversation here. So what you need to do is make sure that you have that you maintain a healthy fee schedule, right? If your practice is even 20 to 30% cash, increasing your fee can still make a dramatic difference to your bottom line. So you want to remember that. You should never settle for the concept that, well, I'm not going to increase my fee because insurance is going to recognize it. You still have people out there, patients max out, that type of thing, or just regular cash patients that you will majorly benefit from, right? So raising your fees might not be a major growth strategy, but it's certainly a great way to maintain your house and keep it in check and effectively, avoid having to have faster insurance, decreases down the road. So keep a healthy UCR fee schedule. Encourage the practices around you to maintain a healthy UCR fee. Because then you're doing your service and other practices justice. Otherwise, you're just causing them major harm. So this is where it really gets interesting for me. This pre-decision analysis, and this is something that my partner Todd King and I and Dr. Kevin Purcell and Monica Glover, the coaches in our areas do a lot of, and we do these all over the country. But if you were to look at this for yourself, and I highly suggest you do, you want to take a look at some of these things, right? One is, how many active patients do you have, right? How many patients are in network with the insurance company that you want to drop? And the first thing you look at is how many are in network with all of them, right? And you might think that you just want to drop the delta, but there might be an appropriate one to drop before that based on your annual patient value, right? So the first thing is, how many current patients do you have on this on these different fee schedules or attached to these different insurance companies? Okay. Another thing that I really like to look at, and I think it's at the bottom here, which is if you're a network, let me just say the statement. So not only do you want to look at your active patient count and what insurances they're on, you want to look at how many of every single one of those patients have a future appointment, right? Because you've got Delta that accounts for 1,000 of your patients, and it makes up 700 of your 700 of those Delta patients have a future appointment. And then you look at your other patient base, and they have different insurances that might be better paying or cash paying, and only 40% of them have future appointments. Well, right there, you've got Delta or this other insurance company taking up all the real estate in your practice, right? And that's not a good thing now, but it is a good thing for your strategy for dropping insurance, right? Because that's one of the ways that you can help mitigate the loss that you could have. And I'll show you what some different examples of that look like. But that's how you can mitigate the loss that you could potentially have by having a strong reactivation campaign. And we'll get into talking about what that looks like. What's the next one? So how many patients are in network with I already said that. So percentage of your production and collections from that insurance. That's an important thing as well. How much are you writing off per month per plan? How many new patients do you welcome from this particular insurance each month? You might think it's a good thing that you are, to the brim with patients, right? You don't have a new patient available or appointment available for, 2-3 weeks, right? But then when you see that 70% of your new patients coming through are Delta and you can't get anybody else in and they're calling somebody else because of those Delta patients are taking up those spots, and the other, maybe umbrella policies or other higher paying or fee for service patients or cash patients, can't get in for 3 weeks, so they're going somewhere else. Well, that's not a good thing, right? The thing you also want to look at is, if you lost 20 to 30% of those patients, what would that look like, right? So if you look at the production that patient base brings in, and you calculate the loss that you would have if 20 to 30% of those patients left, what does that look like? The next thing is, you have a concrete plan to build up the loss of patients. And some of those things I already mentioned are absolutely a great strategy to build up that patient base. And as I mentioned, if you are in networks that are paying you well, how many of those patients are currently not scheduled for their hygiene appointment or any appointment at all? Because that is a massive way to supplement this transition process. All right, so let's jump into the analysis here. So here's an example of one of our practices that we work with, and I'm not going to say the area, but they recently wanted to evaluate their Delta fee schedule and find out how much they were really writing off. Ideally, take 20 to 30 of your most common procedures. I sometimes do it with all of them. It might be a little overkill, but 20 to 30 of the most common procedures is a great way to do it. Generally, we plan at losing about 30% of the PPO patients. Now, I've done this before, and I've lost a little bit more. I've done it before, and I've lost less. But it really depends. Your threshold is dependent on what the total percentage of that patient base makeup already is, right? One of my own practices, I had 50% United Concordia. We dropped them. I think we ended up losing about 40% of them. However, on the back end, we majorly made up for it in the increase in the UCR fee that we had from the 60% that we retained, which is fantastic. That's what you look for. So let's see here. So 30% is a great mark. Again, I mentioned the Kodak study. That study will show you basically where your threshold will be based on what you make up. So you increase your fees X amount, you can sustain so much loss. And there's some papers out there on how to kind of analyze that. But looking at this, we got Delta fees, we got UCR fees. And in this example, this practice was doing 1.1 million per year. 30% of the total production was from Delta patients. So out of that 1.1 million, $330,000 annually was coming in from Delta. On top of it, they were getting about 6 to 7 new patients from Delta each month. So Delta's discount, what you need to know, is 35%, right? So off the top of the UCR, they're already taking off, 35%, $1,000 crown. I'm sure it's higher than that, but they're taking off $350. Okay. So, looking at the threshold of 30%, right? If they lose 30% of the patients from dropping Delta, which is a pretty big number if you think about it, if you calculate it, they're looking at a production loss of the $330,000 of Delta money, which is a total of $99,000 a year, 100 grand per year. And that's a patient loss, right? Only 30% of them, right? I realize it's 7 times 12 is higher than that, but it's only 30% that you're losing because you still can accommodate them and bring them in and convert them. So with the updated production from the other 70% of patients who say that they are going to stay on the UCR fee because they love the practice, they're not going anywhere. Now, all of a sudden, we're going to make up $124,000 because we no longer have to write off that 35% discount. So again, the way that you do that is you take the remaining 70% patient dollars, divide it by your discount that you were giving, or the amount that you were retaining, right? So it'll be 65% in this manner. We'll show you how much you're making up on the back end. And guess what? So all of a sudden, you go from 70% retained at the Delta fee of $231 goes to UCR. That $231,000 value from the 70% remaining jumps up to $355,000. So that's a potential annual gain of $124,000 just by increasing that, which takes it to $355,000, which is a pretty great thing. I think I did the math on this, and I think the threshold for going into the negative, which is not a bad thing, by the way, right? If you lose some patients in the short term to open up more real estate in the long term, that can be a great thing because you can mitigate that with things like, new procedures that you bring into practice, right? I'm pretty sure this office brought on sleep apnea, so they were able to, mitigate even more and not have to deal with, any more loss than necessary, right? So let's talk about some of the strategy here on how to do this. So we've done the analysis. We know where we're going. We're knowing how to, how to calculate what the thresholds are and the potential loss around that and different ways to mitigate the loss on it. Let's talk about how to make it real. Okay. And as I mentioned, a really important document for you guys is going to be this white paper at the end of this, which will show you, give you a playbook that you can customize for your practice on what's going to work for you guys. So the first thing that you do is, this says print out a list, but I don't know who prints out lists anymore. I'm sure you're going to export it into Google spreadsheets or something like that. But what you're going to do is you're going to get a list of all the patients of the insurance program that you're going to be dropping, right? So all of the patients that you're going to be going non-par with, you want to know who they are, when they're coming in, when the last time they were in, when their first visit was, how long they were a patient, because all that stuff's important. It's going to tell you a lot about that person and how important. Well, the conversations are always important, but you probably could realize that a patient that you just acquired a month ago might be a little bit more difficult to retain than a patient that you acquired 6 years ago, right? So again, you want to know who they are, when they were in last, when they first were acquired, and when they're coming in next. Okay. And really the way that we like to do this, and I've done it both ways, but the guidance from Fortune is always going to be, you do this for 6 months. You get the list of all of your patients, okay? And as they're coming through the practice, you have some very, very strategic dialogue with them, chairside and hygiene, or most likely in hygiene, about the fact that you're having trouble with their insurance program, and you most likely are going to be going out of network or not being a participating provider at some point. However, that's not a bad thing for you, Mrs. Smith, because you can go on our membership program, which a lot of our patients are choosing to do. So you can absolutely still come see us. We'll file your claim for you. You can still maximize your benefits, and we'll send you the check. And you gauge that conversation, okay? You do that for 6 months, okay? You do it for 6 months because that's going to get through your entire patient base, or theoretically, it should get through your entire patient base, okay? So that's the communication part to the patient. Okay, so you let them know as they're coming through what you're thinking about doing, and you gauge their focus, right? We do this in Google Sheets, and we flag them as, green is a go, or yellow is potential staying, and red is they just said they weren't having it and they're probably going to be out, right? You always pre-appoint all of them, right? You always pre-appoint all of them, and every morning, you want to have a huddle with your team about the different patients, right? As I mentioned, you want to know who they are, where they came from, how long they've been there, that kind of thing. So you do this every morning in your huddle. Then you want to monitor your patients, as I'm talking about. So you're monitoring them based on, tagging them, okay? Also, we like to collect credit cards because we know that, the beautiful company that Delta and United Concordia are, is they are not willing to send you a check unless you're a participating provider, okay? And collecting credit cards on patients is a good thing anyway, right? So it should be in your financial policy. It's something that we write into our financial policy that every patient that comes through, we prefer to put a credit card on file in case it's a balance, and some do, some don't. You always want to do it in a HIPAA compliant way, so make sure you get a hold of your merchant and make sure that they have a way to kind of vault that information. But you gather the credit cards, because when it takes place, now all of a sudden you're going to have to deal with the patient, right? And they're going to receive the check. And step 6 is you then decide that you're going out of network, and you absolutely send that letter to the insurance company, and you also send a letter to the patient, right? I've done this both ways as well. I've waited for the patient to show back up at the practice and have a very direct, face-to-face, heart-to-heart conversation, and that's worked okay. Sending the letters usually works a little bit better, right? And you have a heartfelt letter there, telling them what to expect, what to come in, and what else you think you put in that letter. Well, you put the opportunity for that patient to have open enrollment into your VIP concierge dental program, membership program, right? Because, patients need to hear about something 12 to 15 times before they're compelled to act on it, right? So you want to start back 6 months ago when you started talking about it. You want to be entering them into things like drip campaigns, which would be done through Modento or RevenueWell. Just blasting them with little things about your membership program, talking to them about what's important about it, even though they're not someone who falls in that category just yet, because they haven't got the letter from you saying that you dropped their insurance. But it's important that they know about it. You can't expect someone to sign up for something when they show up at your practice and they hear about it for the first time, right? Especially with the membership program. You can have success with it, but this will absolutely give you more success. So figure out a way to market your membership program far in advance of telling your patient that you need them to sign up for it now because you no longer participate with their insurance, right? Then it says consider the next visit for the patient, right? So we've sent them a letter. They might not be coming in for another 3 months, okay? So you might want to do things like a reactivation campaign, like call and check on them and let them know it's going to be okay, and that everyone's signing up for this program, right? You keep your member benefits, and you keep your Delta policy, you'll get the check, but you want to consider when the next visit is, because you don't want to leave too much slack in that rope with getting a hold of them to retain them, right? And the last step, which is very important, is monitor the attrition of that patient base, right? Monitor the attrition of patients that have left the practice and the reason why. And I'll get the question sometimes that says, oh, when they don't come to their next hygiene appointment and they say that they're leaving the practice, should I go ahead and inactivate them? My belief is no. My belief is no. I think that you should enter them into a certain category of patient, and you should continue to reach out to them through things like, possibly text, email, maybe direct mailing campaigns, right? Maybe it's a mailing campaign that's not traditional for your patients, but maybe as a direct to public mailing campaign. Because I think those are different ways to keep your product or your practice in front of them, and make sure that they know about all the great things going on there, and how you're still willing to take care of the of them and the whole community. And let's face it, a lot of patients who leave a practice because of this reason, they go find an insurance or an in-network provider. How are those experiences usually? They're usually less than perfect. They're usually subpar, and they a lot of times they always come back. So I think that's an important thing to recognize. So again, it's the list, it's seeing who your patient base is, communicate it, identify it every morning in the huddle, monitor how you're talking to them about it, the soft response that you're getting, collect credit cards at that visit, send a letter to the patients as soon as you drop out of the insurance, consider the next visit and get a hold of them to retain them, and then monitor the attrition and the rate as it goes. So this is a great way to keep a firm grasp on these patients. The other thing that I think that should happen is I think that you should have a person in your office who's really responsible for this. Everyone's responsible for it. But if you could put one person really responsible for the tracking and the reach out, I think that can go over well. Or maybe even just the coaching of your team of how they are doing with their confidence and their certainty building, right? So you'd want to find the person who's the best in your office about talking about these things, to make sure that they're checking in with each other on how they are feeling and the success that they're having with notifying their patients and reaching out to them and retaining them, and also offering the membership program. So in this situation, the out-of-network impact that we saw, right? The per patient value is a really important thing, right? What we saw year one, I think it stayed pretty steady year one. Year two, what do you notice? Well, we noticed that the active patient account dropped a little bit. What about the active patient value? That went up, which is awesome, right? That's typically what we see. That's I've seen in my practices and practices I've coached, and this office has seen the same thing. Year three, which is the projected, is an increase above where they were and where they started in year one, which is great. So let's talk about elevating your systems, right? So how do we elevate our standard of care? What does your reactivation system look like? How are you communicating to your patients, and how are you educating your patients, right? So, your standard of care is something that you want your patients to understand what that is and why it is, okay? You want them to understand why, it's more appropriate for them as a patient to be seen 3 times a year instead of 2 times per year. You want them to understand why you do an exam every single time they come in. You want them to understand why they're a perio patient. Again, your whole team needs to understand your standard of care so they can get behind it, right? Reactivation, one of the biggest opportunities in all practices, and that's the team's ability to go ahead and keep your patients in the wellness wheel. And it looks a little bit different when you're trying to retain a patient base that you've gone out of network with, okay? The conversations sound a little bit different, right? The drip campaigns are a little bit different. So don't discount the fact that you can, don't assume that you can keep doing the same reactivation strategy for these patients, because typically you can, typically you cannot. How are communicating, right? Are you taking advantage of calling and leaving a voicemail, then texting the patient and letting them know that you reached out to them, you're trying to get a hold of them, and then maybe shoot them an email, all right? All methods are good methods, and I think it's important that your team embraces that. And then how are you educating your patients, right? What is the educational material you're using? What websites are you sending them to? Because, let's just face it, they look at us as what we are, which is their, professional educator when it comes to their teeth. And I would say majority, 95% or more, are going to take what we guide them towards and the sites that we guide them towards as the information that they need, right? So understand how you're educating your patients and guide them towards good things. So elevate your systems in this process. Now let's talk about reactivation here for a minute. I know a lot of you have probably heard these different statistics, but this is an absolute team belief on this concept, where 50 to 80% of doctors' production in North America is generated through their ReCare program, okay? And that just even puts more of a precedence on why we need to get our patients back into our hygiene schedule. And remember what I had said, right? A lot of practices, majority, I don't think I've seen one yet that doesn't have enough patients that don't have appointments in other insurance categories that are much better paying to fill almost every hole from a 30 or 40% infiltrated, Delta or United Concordia in a practice or whatever the insurance company is, right? So look for that opportunity. And as we know, 35% of active patients are only seen on the recommended recare cycle, which is right now it's 2 times per year. Okay. So what is this in your practice? And if you guys don't know this or calculate this every single month, you must be calculating your hygiene effectiveness rate. Okay. It's periodic exams done in the last 6 months divided by your active patient base. Okay. And you know, my goal for my offices that we coach is somewhere between 60 and 70%. I think it's a great goal to shoot for. And you know, let's face it, it could even be much, much higher than that. But 35% is the national average. And so you at least need to know what the number is, because you want to know how many opportunities you have out there in order to get back into your wellness wheel. So in this example, 1,140 active patients, 760 recare visits in the last 6 months. That's a 66% hygiene effectiveness rate. I'm going to go through this math kind of quickly, but you know, for me, it's all about commitments from your team and commitments from yourself, right? And if your team could just commit on reactivating 1 person per day, you know, you would have 200 patients reactivated per year. And this is a great exercise to show your team, especially teams that are on their bonus programs, because this is a lot of times what I've seen, the difference between, you know, hitting a bonus and not hitting a bonus. 200 active patients times $165 per hygiene visit, $33,000 annually. For 6 months, seen 2 times per year is $66,000. What do we know about the restorative buzz off of that or spin off of that? Well, we know that in a typical practice, in fortune practice is usually higher, but in a typical practice, the average that we see spent on the restorative program is $2 for every $1 spent in hygiene. So what does that mean? Well, it's $66,000 times 2, $132,000. Add those two together, that's a $200,000 increase of total production that is a lot of times left on the table when we don't have this, you know, aggressive reactivation program in place. It's really great on untapped potential. So let's see here. Current recare effectiveness rate is 66%. Total income for preventative care for the last 12 months was $339,000. Optimal recare factor increase 1.51%. That's a $511,000 possible with 100% recare effectiveness. I think it's a great target to go for. And then it's a loss revenue of $172,000. Let's jump to membership programs, because I want to spend a little bit of time on this, right? You know, it's kind of interesting. These have been around for a while, and I'm actually starting to see them pop up into medicine and you know, primary care these days, which is a great thing. And you know, so what's the reason that you should have a membership program built into your practice? Well, it's absolutely good for your patients. And the other thing is that just like someone should be in charge of this retention program in your practice for your patient base that you're going out of network with, absolutely someone in your practice should own this membership program concept. They should know it better than everyone. They should be able to train everyone on it, and you guys should talk about it all the time. You know, I love being able to say, when someone asks how much does that cost, like a patient, and your first response is, are you part of our VIP concierge dental program or membership program, right? It automatically gets them thinking about it. It keeps them in front. It keeps it in front of them, and they start asking questions about it, right? So how much does that crown cost? Well, are you part of our membership program? No, I'm not. Well, okay, then you wouldn't get the same cost that the members would get, but we can talk to you about that, right? So patients can focus on achieving oral wellness, and they can care and the care they need and want directly from a provider. Again, you want to have these things mapped out. You want to have certainty within your team to be able to discuss it. You want them to be able to know how to handle questions about it, right? No deductibles, annual maximums, no exclusions from procedures, and savings on preventative and restorative procedures, right? That right there sounds much better than their Delta program that they were part of for, you know, the last 20 years that they were in Delta. It's massively good for your practice, right? So, you know, the one that we endorse is Plan for Health. I use it in all of my offices that I own, as well as offices that, you know, I endorse it with the offices that I coach. I really like it because they send you all the marketing material around it. They help you, you know, strategize around the fee structure behind it. They help with the training on it. I think it's a great program in tandem with their fortune coach. But, you know, patients pre-schedule and prepay, which is awesome. There's a decrease in no-shows and cancellations because they know that they need to get their visits in within that year. You know, it helps with predictable schedules and overhead. And guess what? You don't have the headaches with insurance that you have to submit and appeal and process it and all that fun stuff. So membership programs are essential. They're going to really help your practice grow. Or, if not in place, they're obviously going to do what they need to do for it. And there is a appropriate set price point for membership programs. I've seen some that are way, way, way too low. And we got to think about that. I'm a big fan of somewhere between 10 to maybe 15% off of your operative fee schedule. If your fees are set in the 80th or 90th percentile, maybe 20%, but you don't want to make yourself delta again, right? So create a membership strategy around it in order to have a lot more success with keeping patients in the practice for with whenever you go out of network. So marketing, what did I say at the beginning of this? I said that anytime you make a major shift in your business, you need to really create a new marketing strategy to market towards a new patient pool in order to fill some of those gaps and open some of those doors that were closed for a while. So tailored marketing plan in order to get new people into your patient base, right? And just think about it. For years, you may have been the practice that was excited about just having, insurance send you patients. Well, guess what? You just created a care to share program with that insurance company, right? And they have built up that patient base, and now it's coming to backfire on you, right? So you got to, kind of have a shift of thinking here and say, how can I get a different type of patient base, a different type of style of patient into my business? So a tailored marketing program, really develop a new patient experience that is above and beyond. I think one of the biggest compliments that we get in my offices that I coach and own, they say that the new patient experience was one that they never experienced in dentistry, and their paradigm has drastically been shifted based on going through that paradigm shifting experience as a new patient in our business. Case presentation enrollment, right? I'm a big believer that it is our responsibility as dental professionals to help our patients understand why they should value the treatment that we are offering them, because it can very much so be, and normally is, life-changing procedure. So you got to take ownership of case presentation and the enrollment process that goes with it. Another great thing is patient testimonials. One of the hottest marketing things going on right now. If you've been on the webinar tonight, hope you guys got some value out of it. And again, just thank you for putting your trust in us, and we're here to help you however you think we might be able to.
All right, put in any questions you guys have, and we'll make sure we get that answered. We really appreciate you guys joining us for this Wednesday hump week, middle of the week webinar. All right, everybody have a great evening.